All people in pain, anger, sadness, relationship problems, these often accompany an abortion. But there is hope. Call 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who has already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
No wonder fake news resonates so much with Trump fans, because so much of it is fake. The Huffington Post and BuzzFeed and Salon, they make their money by how many clicks they get.
You've had now a year adults acting like children, and now the children acting like adults.
I can't imagine living by myself and not having an ability to defend myself.
The millennials, the Gen Xers are saying, look, we've heard enough.
There's about 3 cents worth of tin plate steel in this can.
Yesterday we told you about Chicago, the city of Chicago, and its new plan to give ID cards to illegal immigrants. Those official IDs will allow non-citizens to vote. America is supposed to be run by Americans. That's the point of it. If you're looking for a foreign influence scandal, and everyone in here in D.C. is looking for one, you got it.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome to a brand new week of broadcasting on American Family Radio Network. Brian Fisher is my name, back at full strength. Jeff Reed, our producer, back from NRB. How was the trip?
It was.
That's the National Religious Broadcasters Convention.
There was a lot going on there. A lot. Some interesting breakout sessions, some to do with the censorship and shadow banning of conservatives. It was very informative. Yes, it was. You got the chance to meet some really cool people. We had an interview with Tony Evans and Carol Swain, and yeah, it was a good time.
Cool deal. Tony was a classmate of mine. We were there at the same time. Didn't really know each other very well, but at the same time in Dallas Seminary. Rob Reed back with us, running the board. And Rob, you've got some.
Rob Garner.
Want to share your good news? What's that?
Rob Garner.
What'd they say?
Rob Reed.
Rob Reed was my son's Little League coach in the 13 to 15 year old.
Oh, okay.
Anyway,
and he was also an actor on 1 Adam 12. Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember that.
So. Okay.
Anyway, you got some good news for our listening audience.
I do. It looks like that we're going to have our second grandbaby in July. My daughter's 20 weeks, and we had the big reveal this Friday night. And we're going to have a granddaughter.
Going to have a baby
So that's
girl.
one of each now.
One of each. Well, that's kind of cool. You sent me a little video you took of the reveal party. You guys were in a restaurant, and Ashley, your daughter, had a cake there.
Yeah.
And she sliced it open, and you didn't know until she pulled a piece of cake out.
That's right.
What the gender of the baby was, and it was pink. Pink right. Inside, and so I told you it was a girl.
You mean Grandma and Grandpa didn't even know? You didn't have an inside track?
Ashley sent word to me to not even ask.
Off limits. So.
Off limits. So she wanted a surprise for everybody.
Yeah.
With my first grandson, she didn't even know. The only one that knew was her husband. She said, "I don't want to know. I want."
So
it to
he
be a
surprised
surprise.
her as well as everybody else.
Right?
How did he do it? How did he reveal?
We did the cake thing again.
So how did he bake the cake?
No, he had it done though.
Okay. I was going to get really impressed with Daniel. So.
Yeah.
All right. Now he's back to the Daniel that I figured he was.
There
All
you
right.
go.
Let's turn our attention to the Word of God. We are one of the things I told you I like about the schedule that we are following is that we change the diet every couple of 3 weeks. We've changed the diet from Psalms. We were in Psalms for about a week. Now we're in the book of 2 Samuel. We went through 1 Samuel a month or so ago. Next book is 2 Samuel, and this is the story of the transition of the kingdom from Saul's family to David and the beginning of the Davidian dynasty. And the whole point of this, the bigger point of 2 Samuel is Samuel, I believe, wrote this book, and he wanted to preserve for the people of Israel. Here is a book that describes the kind of leaders, the kind of political leaders that you need to look for your nation. The kind of qualities of character that you want to be looking for. Here's what happens when you've got a political leader that has those qualities. Here's what happens when you have a political leader that does not have those qualities. So it's a primer in how to pick a president, if you want to look at it that way. Now, again, we're in 2 Samuel chapter 2. Now, David had been anointed king over Judah. It says in verse 4 that the men of Judah came, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah. That was in the area of Hebron. So the southern kingdom, after Saul died on Mount Gilboa at the hands of the Philistines, left Israel, the northern kingdom, in a state of flux. Now, Abner, who was the commander of Saul's army, took Saul's son Ishbosheth, took him across the Jordan River, took him north up to Mahanaim in Gilead, and made him king over Israel. So Gilead was on the other side of the Jordan, on the east side of the Jordan, and it was north. And there they made Ishbosheth king of Israel, succeeding his father Saul. Then Abner decided he wanted to dethrone David and unite the kingdom under Ishbosheth, which would put him in charge as de facto king, since he was running Ishbosheth's life for him. He was stronger than he was. Ishbosheth would do anything Abner told him to do. He would be the de facto king. So he took a bunch of soldiers south into David's kingdom, the kingdom of Judah, and confronted Joab, who was David's commander-in-chief, or commander of the army, and soldiers from David's army at a large pool in a place called Gibeon. Each side picked 12 of their best young soldiers and had them face off mano a mano. And Joab's men, the men of David, won the showdown. We see the battle described in verses 15 and 16 of chapter 2. Then they arose and passed over by number, 12 for Benjamin and Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, 12 of the servants of David, and each caught his opponent by the head, thrust his sword in his opponent's side, so they fell down together. And the battle was very fierce that day, and Abner and the men of Israel were beaten before the servants of David. So the abortive coup attempt fails. Joab survived, along with his two younger brothers, Abishai and Asahel. Now Abner, since they had lost, he was running for his life, and Asahel, the younger brother of Joab, was chasing him, and he was as swift of foot as a wild gazelle. It says in chapter 2, verse 18. So he was closing the ground pretty fast on Abner, closing in on him. Abner knew he was a more experienced soldier than Asahel, and so he didn't want to kill him. The only way to do is try to convince him to stop chasing him, and he tried to do this because he really didn't want to kill him. So verse 21, 22, Abner said to him, "Turn aside to your right hand or to your left and seize one of the young men and take his spoil." But Asahel would not turn aside from following him. And Abner said again to Asahel, "Turn aside from following me. Why should I strike you to the ground? How then could I lift up my face to your brother Joab?" But Asahel wouldn't take his advice. Twice he tried to warn him. He was relentless, and finally Abner had to strike. Verse 23, one of the verses that my son would have loved when he was a young guy. But he refused to turn aside. Therefore Abner struck him in the stomach with the butt of his spear, so that the spear came out his back, and he fell there and died where he was. So Abner then managed to convince Joab to declare a truce. That took a little bit of diplomacy, because obviously Joab very unhappy about his brother being killed, and everybody went home. So they struck a truce, everybody went home. David, in this skirmish, suffered only 19 dead. Abner lost 360 men, so a very decisive victory for David. Now, what followed was a lengthy war between the house of Saul and the house of David that went on for almost 7 years, according to chapter 3, verse 1, until the house of Saul was vanquished and David was anointed as king over both Israel and Judah. It says in chapter 3, verse 1, there was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David, and David grew stronger and stronger, while the house of Saul became weaker and weaker. So Abner then made a claim for the throne of the kingdom of Israel. Remember, this guy's ambitious. He wanted to dethrone David. Now he wants to take the crown of Israel away from Ishbosheth. So he made a claim for himself by sleeping with Saul's concubine. That's how you would make a claim for the throne. You'd go sleep with the concubine, the mistress of the current king, and that would let everybody know that you were the next in line, unless the current king did something. Now that ticked off Ishbosheth because he knew Abner was making a bid to be king by sleeping with a woman who had belonged to the previous king, but he was too weak to do anything about it other than complain. Verse 7, Saul had a concubine. Ishbosheth said to Abner, "Why have you gone into my father's concubine?" But he didn't do anything about it. Back with more. Stay with us.
Hey, my name's Brant. You ever make a change and then wonder, why didn't I do this a long time ago? That's what's happening for thousands of people with regard to their health care. They're joining Medishare, and then they're wondering, why didn't I already do this? For most members, it costs less than half what they were paying for their old health plan. There's a huge provider network, too. You can customize your plan, and this is awesome. Medishare members can go online with a doctor 24/7. So if you need a prescription for the flu or something, it's so convenient for you and your family. So yeah, this is one of those why did I wait on this things. And if you don't love your current health plan, you're not stuck with it. You can join Medishare anytime. By the way, to give you an idea, the typical savings for a family, about $500 a month. It just makes so much sense. Check it out. They're super easy to talk to. Call 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Corner. The Russian collusion investigation has yielded its first substantive indictments. 13 Russian nationals and 3 entities were charged in an elaborate plot to sow discord in America starting in 2014 and included supporting Bernie Sanders and Jill Stein's presidential campaigns and organizing anti-Trump rallies after the 2016 election. While announcing the charges, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein emphatically stated not one American was involved in the Russian scheme. This is an official declaration that the Russian collusion narrative is dead. What will the talking snakes do now?
Listen to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays from 5 to 6 p.m. Central on AFR. For more from Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, welcome back to this brand new edition of Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher. Want to finish our little story here, and then we'll go to prayer about this battle between the house of Saul, who's dead now. Remember, he died on Mount Gilboa at the hand of the Philistines. David was anointed king of the southern kingdom of Judah, and Abner had Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, anointed as the king of Israel, the northern kingdom. So anyway, Abner, trying to make a claim for the crown, slept with Ishbosheth's concubine, and remember, Ishbosheth was too weak and too timid and too fearful and too unable to do anything about it. And so this whole thing, when we got ripped, I mean, all Ishbosheth could do would complain, but the fact that he complained against Abner ticked him off. So he decided he was going to do his best to transfer the kingdom of Israel, Ishbosheth's kingdom, to David. And he even told Ishbosheth that this is what he was going to do. So Joab sends an envoy to David. All I ask, said David, is for you to send. So he's sending an envoy to David to try to make peace and see if he can hand over the kingdom. David says, the only thing I want is for you to send Michal to me. Michal was a wife that Saul took away from me. Michal is Saul's daughter. Remember, and Saul said, look, you want my daughter. David fell in love with her, wanted her hand in marriage. Saul said, well, there's got to be a bride price. You got to bring me a dowry. What do you want? And Saul said, bring me 100 Philistine foreskins. Now, the reason Saul asked for that is you figure, well, if David tries to do that, he just might because he really loves my daughter. Certainly one of those 100 Philistines is going to kill him. Well, David managed to get not only 100 foreskins, but 200, and came and dumped them in front of Saul and said, where's my wife? And Saul wouldn't let him have it. So Saul said, look, I'll do this deal with you, Abner, but you got to send me my wife, Michal. And so Abner comes and has a powwow with David, promises to bring him Michal, who is the daughter of Saul, and promises to bring all of Israel under David's control. In verse 21 of chapter 3, he went away in peace. Now Joab, who was, remember, the leader of David's military, was away on a raid. He comes back and he finds out that Abner had been there. Abner was his rival. Abner was the one that killed his younger brother. He found out what David had done. He was furious. He thought David was being played. He thought he didn't want Abner anywhere around since Abner had killed his brother. He wanted revenge. And plus, he thought Abner would be a threat on his own designs for power. So he goes off on David, just rips David for a lack of judgment in this whole deal. And without David knowing about it, Joab sent some men after Abner before he had gone very far, and Joab knifed him to death without David's awareness, knifed him to death. Now, David made it clear after this, as they're announcing the death and planning the funeral, that he had had nothing to do with it. He wanted the entire nation to do it. He had absolutely nothing to do with it. It was all Joab's fault, and he places, in fact, a curse on Joab's entire family line in verse 29. May it fall upon the head of Joab, the blame for Abner's death. May it fall upon the head of Joab and upon all his father's house, and may the house of Joab never be without one who has a discharge, or who is leprous, or holds a spindle, or who falls by the sword, or lacks bread. So that was the curse that David pronounced on Joab's house. And so David has a state funeral for Abner, the son of Saul, weeps over his grave, fasts all day and morning, pronounced judgment against Joab. Again, in verse 34, he says, your hands were not bound, speaking of Abner, your feet were not fettered. As one falls before the wicked, you have fallen. So he calls Joab, his own commander, calls him wicked. So everybody in the nation understood then that David had nothing to do with Abner's death. Now here's where we come face to face with David's fatal weakness. And we'll track this as we go through David's life. We're starting a journey now through David's life here. And David had one pronounced fatal weakness, and that is he could not be firm and direct and bold with people that were close to him, with his own family. He kept letting them get away with stuff, with one thing after another, and it came back to bite him in every case. We'll see it again and again. So he was like a parent who just cannot bring himself to discipline his disobedient or rebellious children because it's too difficult. He doesn't want to do it. He's afraid to do it. It makes him feel bad. He just can't bring himself to do it. So he lets his children get away with things for which they ought to be disciplined or punished. And in the end, it winds up coming back on the parent who doesn't do the discipline. Now, this, because, what David said, here's the king. He says, may the blame for this fall on Joab. Joab had committed cold-blooded murder. He'd shed the blood of war in a time of peace. They were at peace. He shed the blood of war, what you do when you run a knife through somebody. That's something you do in war. He shed the blood of war in a time of peace. Notice the difference. Shedding blood in war is different than shedding blood in peacetime. Some of our pacifists think it's all the same, but it's not clearly in the Bible. And verse 39, David says this, may the Lord repay the evildoer according to his wickedness. Well, who was the king? Who was the one who was responsible to administer justice in David's kingdom? It was David. He was the king. He was the one who had the responsibility. It was his job to repay the evildoer according to his wickedness. It was his job to find Joab guilty of murder and to require that he pay the ultimate penalty for that, which would be to forfeit his own life. But he could not bring himself to do it. So this was his fatal weakness. He just could not discipline the people around him because he could not discipline his own sons when they needed it. He wound up losing his kingdom for a time, experiencing great heartache and loss. He was afraid, timid, and soft when he needed to be bold and firm. Well, let's go to prayer, if you'd be kind enough to join me. Lord God, I pray this day for myself, for my family, for the listening audience of Focal Point. I pray for every man, woman, and child within the sound of my voice. I pray for our cities and our communities and our states and our nations, for our mayors, for our governors, for our president. I pray that you will prompt us to show kindness this day to others, especially to those you have placed over us. I ask you to bless us and show us kindness and faithfulness in return, and grant us favor not only in your eyes, but also in the eyes of men. I pray that people around us will take note and be pleased with what we do, that we may be recognized and honored as you see fit. I pray that we will choose to be strong and courageous in the face of any challenges we confront in life. May we grow stronger and stronger each day. Pray that you will protect us from the spirit of bitterness and revenge that drove Joab, and remind us of Abner's counsel that the sword of revenge will devour forever and only lead to more bitterness. May we choose to forgive and trust you to repay every evildoer according to his evil deeds. May each one of us be known as a man of peace. We ask you for political leaders at every level who will, like David, inquire of you before every decision, who will trust in you to advance and promote them in the way and the time of your choosing, and who will be men of peace and goodwill, men who will seek peace and pursue it. We pray also that they will have the courage to do what is right and just, even at personal risk, so that the rule of law may always be honored in our land. Lord, we see that even as David prospered in public life, he was making decisions in his private life that would later cause him great pain. I pray that all of us will choose by your grace and power to make wise choices in family life. Please rescue us from the hand of all our enemies, seen and unseen, and grant us the desires of our heart. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, well, we'll continue with our study in the life of David as we make our way through the book of 2 Samuel. You can get caught up by going to pray.afa.net, read along with us, and pray along with us. Well, let's grab some sound bites and content to get going today. Well, let's just start with this. Let's start with clip number 1. This was Donald Trump speaking at a fundraiser on Saturday night, and the left just went crazy with this because the left took him seriously. I tell you, I got a story in here. You might be aware of the site, the Babylon Bee. Yeah. It's a Christian website of satire. Everything they do is satire. It says it right on the top of the page and the bottom of the page. This is satire. Well, here is what the Babylon Bee did. They wrote a story stating that they had discovered that CNN had purchased an industrial-sized washing machine to help its journalists and news anchors spin the news before publication. Now, you know who Snopes is, right?
Yeah.
Snopes is the big fact checkers. They fact-checked this article. I'm serious. I'm looking right at their piece. Here's the claim. Snopes is fact-checking this thing. The claim is CNN invested in an industrial-sized washing machine to help their journalists and news anchors spin the news before publication. Rating, false. Oh, color me surprised.
I would say mostly false.
Anyway, that just cracks me up that they fact-checked the Babylon Bee. Holy smokes. Apparently I have no idea what
somebody needs to fact-check Snopes.
And give them a dictionary definition of the word satire. Anyway, so here's Donald Trump. And again, one of the problems you discover with the left is they have no sense of humor. You can't poke fun at them. You say anything in jest, they're going to take it literally. They're going to push it to the floor. They're going to hold you accountable for every nuance, every implication of it. So here's Donald Trump speaking at a fundraiser. They're just having some fun. And he's talking about the president of China, who, by the way, just got himself declared president for life. He convinced the parliament of China to do away with term limits in China. So here's Donald Trump talking about that.
Don't forget, China's great, and Xi is a great gentleman. He's now president for life. President for life. No, he's great. Hey, look, he was able to do that. I think it's great. Maybe we'll have to give that a shot someday.
Maybe we ought to give that a shot someday. So the talking snake media just went nuts with that. Here's Donald Trump admitting to the entire world that he has aspirations to become a tyrant in the United States of America, to become the permanent political ruler in the United States of America, to start a kingly, autocratic, tyrannical reign. See, it is right there. You heard it from his own lips. So maybe we ought to put Snopes and put Snopes on this. Let's get Snopes on this. They did such a great job with the Babylon Bee. I'm sure they can get to the bottom of the deal here. So you are listening to Focal Point, the American Family Radio. Oscars tanked last night, dropped 16% from last year. You know the reason to me is, number one, they feature movies that nobody watches. Nobody goes to their movies anymore. They pick all these art house pieces that nobody sees, nobody enjoys, nobody wants to watch, and those are the ones that get these Oscar awards. Second thing, it's all political, and people are just tired of it. They tune it out. But here's the other thing I love about the Oscars. You know, the whole thing last night was devoted to an anti-gun rally. They had 500 armed policemen surrounding the theater.
This is Dr. Richard Lamb, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. I picked up my New York Times this week and read a thoroughly disgusting but truly enlightening op-ed about the late, great Billy Graham, entitled Billy Graham's Missed Opportunities. The author, David Hollinger, is an emeritus professor of history at UCal Berkeley and obviously clueless about the basic Christianity once delivered to the faithful in Holy Scripture. What were some of Billy Graham's, quote, missed opportunities, according to Dr. Hollinger? Well, first, he supported a fundamentalist reading of the Bible in the mission fields, while more ecumenical groups like the World Council of Churches promoted less sectarian versions of Christianity and less conversion-centered modes of interaction with the peoples of the globe, end quote. In other words, Billy Graham insisted that missionaries be missionaries and proclaim the timeless truth of the gospel. He then went on to say that another of Billy Graham's missed opportunities was that he claimed that the heterosexual, nuclear, patriarchal family was God's will, and that faith in Jesus was the only road to salvation. Well, yes, because Billy Graham is a faithful, Bible-believing Christian. Dr. Hollinger went on to say that Graham distanced himself from the effort of ecumenists to revise Christianity in cosmopolitan directions. He encouraged his vast and devoted following to believe that God's word was unchanging and that liberals were substituting their own ideas for those of a supernatural, unchanging deity revealed in the Bible, end quote. Thank God. In other words, Dr. Billy Graham refused to become a clueless heretic like David Hollinger and be a spiritual Pied Piper leading people to perdition. Instead, Billy Graham preached the true gospel, the timeless truth that Jesus and Jesus alone saves. Thank God. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio. Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name, congenial, convivial, and amiable as always. And the program is Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio. Now, I want to talk a little bit about this issue of tariffs. You know, typically economic stuff is just about the most boring stuff you can talk about on a talk radio program. But this is actually a really, really important issue. Now, one issue here, I'm just going to mention this at the beginning because I believe one of my jobs is to educate you not only in what the Bible teaches, but also what the Constitution teaches. These are the two books I carry into the studio every single day, the Bible and the Constitution. One of those is much larger than the other, and that's because it's way more important, and we haven't had to amend it 27 times. But the Constitution is important because it is the supreme law of the land. It's founded and grounded and based on the worldview of the Judeo-Christian tradition and the Scripture, but from a political standpoint, it is our supreme law of the land. Now, if you look at the Constitution, I'm just going to read it to you here, what the very words of the Constitution about tariffs. Now, remember, a tariff is an import duty. A tariff is where we say to somebody, you want to sell your goods in our country, we're going to slap a tariff, we're going to slap a tax on whatever we consider to be the value of your product. Then you pay that tariff, you pay that tax, we'll let your goods into the United States and you can sell them here. That is called a tariff or an impost duty or an import duty. Now, according to Article 1, Section 8, listen to this, the Congress, remember that word, the Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises. That's import duties, talking about tariffs there, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States, but all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. So that is Congress's power to tax and impose tariffs on goods that people want to sell in the United States. What I want you to observe there, who has that authority according to the Constitution? Congress has that authority. The president does not have that authority, but Congress, somewhere along the line, delegated that authority to the president, which they have no authority to do. What they have the authority to do is to establish a tariff, and then it would be the president's responsibility to implement that tariff, but it's not the president's job. He has no authority to decide tariffs for himself. That's the job of Congress. So that in a situation like that, every one of these tariff issues would be debated, deliberated, and decided on by Congress. And I will guarantee you we wouldn't get, if Congress reserved or held to itself its constitutional authority over the tariff process, you'd never have this tariff on steel and this tariff on aluminum, which are bad for business, bad for consumers, bad for America, and I'll explain why here in just a second. We've got some sound bites on this topic. But realize, tariffs have always been sort of a contentious issue in American history. I'm not going to pretend I got the answer, the silver bullet on all of this. But what this tariff will do, let me just explain briefly how this tariff will work. This tariff will represent a tax increase on the American people. Because realize this, importers don't pay the tariff. I mean, it looks like they do. It looks like they do, but all they do is jack up their prices to cover it. So who pays for the tariff? It's the American consumer that's actually paying the tax. They're paying the tariff because the goods now that come into the country are more expensive than they would be otherwise. So if American people buy those more expensive products, they are paying the tariff. It's not falling on the international companies, it's falling on the American consumer. This has always been the complaint. This is where we got the income tax, by the way. Because up until the 16th Amendment, all the revenue of the federal government came from tariffs. There was no other source of revenue for the federal government. It took care of everything. And it was about 3% of the budget, by the way. Right now, or 3% of GDP, right now, government takes about 18 to 20% of our GDP. Can you imagine how much freedom we'd have if our government only took 3% instead of 18% or 20% of everything the nation produces? But the American people got more and more ticked off because they realized that they were the ones that were paying the tariffs. So if there was a tariff that Congress imposed on shoes from overseas, when they went down and bought a pair of Italian shoes, they were paying the 4% or whatever it was tariff. And meanwhile, the big shots, the guys that produce lots of goods and were already very wealthy because they were corporate mongos, they could make shoes and they would have a built-in margin of 3 to 4%. So realize this, they could raise their prices 3 to 4% and still be able to keep their prices under the foreign imports. And the American people wouldn't have a choice. They're going to have to buy shoes from an American manufacturer or from international. American manufacturers boost their prices till they're just under the cost of foreign shoes with that tariff imposed. So maybe they're charging this amount for shoes, starting a buck a pair, just pick a number out of the air. Then they slap this 10% tariff on international shoes. Now the same shoe, the international producer has to charge $1.10 to break even or to make a profit. And so the American producer says, look, let's charge $1.05. So they're making a 5% profit clean off the top. Who is paying for that profit? The American people who buy these shoes. So they got fed up with that. It's not, and there was no corporate tax at that time, none. Zip, zero, nada, because the only source of revenue were tariffs. So they said, look, this is not fair. The rich people are not paying their fair share. How familiar does that sound? And they are getting rich off of our hard work. They're getting rich off of our backs because we're paying the tariff. They aren't. And it's going right into their pocket. It's clean profit that we are providing. We're pouring. So that's where the whole idea of an income tax came from. And the idea, I'm way off topic here, by the way, but I don't care because I love this topic.
Go with it.
But the income tax, the word income, at the time the 16th Amendment was passed, it meant all sources of income other than wages and salaries, because it was a soak the rich tax. It wasn't designed to go after the guy that was working for wages, wasn't designed to go after the guy that's being paid a salary. It was designed to go after the corporate big shots, the corporate hot rocks, who were getting rich off these tariffs that the American people, the people that are getting wages and were working by the hour, they're the ones that are paying the tariff. And the American people got fed up and said, that's not fair. You need to put a tax on the rich people. And that's what the 16th Amendment was supposed to be. So income, the definition of income would be things like corporate profit. It would be things like corporate income. It would be things like dividend income. It would be things like interest on investments, corporate profits. That's what income was. It was every source of income other than wages and salaries. And that's how they sold it to the American people. Boy, I'm way off topic here. But that's how they sold it to the American people, as a soak the rich tax, if you can believe it. That's how, I wondered about that till I started researching this to do a little bit of writing on the Constitution. How in the world did anybody convince the American people to create this monstrosity, to do this to themselves? Yeah. We just did our taxes. It's agony. It's agony for every American that has to do it. How in the world did they convince the American people to put this kind of onerous tax burden on themselves? Well, the truth is that the American people did not do it. They voted to put a tax on the rich guys. And that's what the income tax was supposed to be. That's how they got people to vote for it. Finally, they told the American people, we're going to get those fat cats. We're going to punish them. They're going to pay their fair share. And that's how the thing slid through. So anyway, getting back to wherever I started, getting back to this tariff thing, it's an authority that only ought to be in the hands of Congress. The president shouldn't have any authority to establish tariffs. His job is to implement them. It would be Congress's job to set them. So what's going to happen then with this tariff on steel and aluminum? Everything that is made with steel and aluminum that's sold in the United States is going to cost more money. That is the bottom line here. Everything that has steel or aluminum in it and is sold and purchased in the United States of America is going to cost more money. Now, I want to give you one example. This is clip 5. This is Wilbur Ross. He's the chairman of the Commerce. He's one of the guys out there trying to sell this. Now, I want you to listen to him admit this. Now, this is what the swamp always does when they want us to swallow an increase in taxation. They want to tell us, man, it won't even hurt. It's so small, it's so tiny, you won't even feel it. And that's how they get us to, well, maybe it's not so bad after all. But you get enough of those, it's like death by 1,000 little paper cuts. You keep getting one little tiny paper cut, it doesn't hurt that much, but you get enough of those, pretty soon you're bleeding to death. So listen to Wilbur Ross. He admits here that this is a tax on the American people. Clip 5.
First of all, let's put it in perspective. I just bought a can of Campbell's soup today at the 7-Eleven. It was $1.99 for the can. There's about 3 cents worth of tin plate steel in this can. So if it goes up 25%, that's a tiny fraction of 1 penny. That's not a noticeable thing.
Well, maybe to you, Wilbur Ross. Wilbur Ross is a multimillionaire, so it's no biggie to him. But you buy enough cans of soup, it could make a difference. Do we have time for Kudlow? Yeah, let's play Larry Kudlow, clip number 6. He tried to talk Donald Trump out of doing it, and here is why.
There's 200,000, so more or less, 200,000 steel and iron workers in America, and aluminum. There's 5.5 million employed by businesses that use steel.
Like the automakers and
others. Auto, energy, infrastructure,
from the beer,
cars, planes,
yeah.
Diet Pepsi and Diet Coke. I don't want to give everyone free time, but that's what you're getting. Veronique de Rugy from the Mercatus Institute has done this work. Here's another number.
Did you tell him that? Did you make that argument to him directly?
Yes, I and others have made that. In the Reagan years, we used to call the free traders the white hats and the protectionists the black hats. The black hats won this time around. I'm very sorry, as it will damage the economy to some extent. There's 154 million Americans who work. That's the bigger number. They are going to be affected by steel price hikes. In 2002-2003, George W. Bush used tariff protection on steel, and prices went up a lot.
All right, so Larry Kudlow saying, look, the American people, whoever implemented this, are not really thinking this thing through. They have just imposed a tax on the American consumer. We'll be back with your calls, 888-589-8840.
I would have no clue what's going on if I don't listen to AFR, and it prompts you to get in the fight.
We're collecting stories of how God is using American Family Radio.
I've gotten so much out of AFR. It's strengthened my faith. I've truly turned my life around.
Take a moment to share how God is using American Family Radio in your life. Call our listener story voicemail at 877-876-8893. That's 877-876-8893.
Exposing Washington with Walker Wildman.
So who is responsible for the dysfunction in Washington? That's what we're going to be discussing today.
We have become one of the most litigious societies on the planet.
The goal of this show is to bring clarity to the news coming out of Washington, D.C., and to expose the deception that has plagued our nation's capital for decades.
Exposing Washington.
Each Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Central.
On American Family Radio.
Folks, I know what you think. I want to be able to get my money. I'm not giving my money to anybody. I'm not giving it to the church, not giving it to the ministry. I'm hoarding it. I'm keeping it. I'm going to build. And when it gets so big, I'll build another silo, and I'll build another silo after that. And I'm just going to keep growing it, because when I retire, I'm going to have more money and I know what to do with it. But look, it's important that you consider permanent income. The key word is charitable gift annuity. You notice I don't say charitable annuity. I never leave the word gift out. It's a gift.
A knowledgeable AFA Foundation representative will gladly explain the nuances of charitable gift annuities and answer your questions. Find out about charitable gift annuities when you call 800-326-4543, extension 345. 800-326-4543, extension 345. Or by visiting afafoundation.net.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Hi, welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Number to call if you want to join our conversation. Didn't give you a whole lot to talk about today. We can obviously talk about what happened with David. We could talk about his fatal weakness of being couldn't bring himself to discipline his own family. That turned out to be the fatal weakness, most prominent weakness in his whole life, and we'll see that illustrated over and over and over again. You might want to talk about that. We talked about tariffs. We talked about the income tax. That was sold as a soak the rich deal. And by the way, that's how they made it apply to us. They just changed the definition of income. Somewhere along the line, about 10 or 15 years after the income tax was instituted, they just subtly changed the definition of income. So now all of a sudden it did include wages and salaries. And the problem here is when they started including salaries and wages, it was only for people that were making a boatload of money. So we didn't care. The ordinary people didn't care. Well, it's only applying to the millionaires, so why should we care? Well, they just start ratcheting the level down at which people qualify for income tax, and all of a sudden, here we are, every April, beating our brains out to meet that April 15 deadline. We talk about that, talk about taxes, talk about tariffs, talk about the hypocrisy of Hollywood. Have this big anti-gun rally. That was a 2 or 3 hour anti-gun rally for the Oscars last night, and they're surrounded by 500 armed LAPD officers. They had barriers up, they had ramps in place, they had traffic walled off, they had walls in place, and yet they want to get after us for wanting us to be able to protect our students in the schools. 888-589-8840 is the number, 888-589-8840.
And most of that police force were carrying ARs, right?
Well, they did have ARs there, no question about it. Yeah. Absolutely. I bet just about all of them did.
Yep.
So, yep. All right, so you don't let anybody tell you that an AR is not a self-defense weapon or not a defensive weapon. Yeah, don't let them lie to you. All right, let's go to the phones. 888-589-8840 is the number. 888-589-8840. Talk about anything we've talked about in the first hour. Let's go to Chris in Rockwall, Texas. Go ahead, Chris. What's on your mind?
I have a question about the tariff. First of all, I listen to I'm an avid listener. I love listening to you.
Thank you.
I also listened to Sandy Rios, and she had somebody on this morning regarding economics and Congress, and they mentioned how China is dumping their cheap steel into our country, causing our American-made steel makers to have to pay to have to try to compete with them.
Mhm.
And we want American-made. We want this. And secondly, I love President Trump. What he does, he just doesn't do as a whim. He has advisors that advise him. I feel he has some great advisors who recommended this. And on his platform of let's keep American things made here in America, let's keep our steel bought here as well. I'd like to listen to your comments on that.
Okay, Chris, I appreciate, again, people come out at different places on these tariffs. George Bush implemented a tariff on the steel industry, and Ronald Reagan did the same thing. So Republicans, Ronald Reagan, Ronaldus Magnus, he's the king of conservatives. He imposed a tariff. So again, I want to be sure we understand that, and Chris is making that point. There are people who can make an argument for a tariff. But here's what I think we need to do, because Chris makes a good point. The Chinese did dump their steel at below their cost or below price, and we couldn't compete with that. Our steel manufacturers, if they were to cut prices to the point where they could compete, they'd be out of business. But here's what I think we have to do in a situation like that. What you have to do is to look at why is it that American steel manufacturers cannot compete with Chinese manufacturers. Let's figure out why. Let's figure out what the difference is in the process that China uses to manufacture steel and that we use. How come they can produce it for so much less? Let's figure out what that is, and let's see how we can rectify the problem. And the problem is very simple. It's wages. It's wages. Chinese producers don't have to pay their workers as much money as American producers do, largely by virtue of the union contracts. I don't want to bash unions, and that's not the point of this. But my point is, you have union scale set for those that work in the steel industry. Those wages are astronomically higher than the wages that are being paid to Chinese manufacturers. And so the question would be then, if we were to do something with those wage levels, be able to bring them down, could steel manufacturers, could they find qualified help who would do the work of manufacturing steel for lower wages? Would you have people that would be interested in doing that? And I'm willing to bet that there are. And they'll go where the jobs are and all that kind of thing. So there may have to be an adjustment. The wages are not going to be what they used to be. But that would make American steel competitive with imported steel. I realize a lot of people are going to like that because it's going to lower wages for American workers in order to keep them competitive. But that's how a free market economy works. All right, let's go to Larry, Marion, Illinois. Larry, welcome. What's on your mind?
Brian, I seldom disagree with you, but I would urge you to take a couple of the things into consideration. I could give you 10 reasons why this tariff is a good idea. Let me just give you two, and I got to get off the phone here. Number one is everybody that's against this tariff says we're going to start a trade war. I got news for them. I'm an old guy, and for the last 40 years, we've been in a trade war, and the only problem is we're losing. We send amateur negotiators from our government over to sit down at a table with professional Chinese negotiators, and we've lost repeatedly under every administration. Number two is if you don't have a good, sound aluminum industry in this country, you can't build airplanes. If you don't have a good steel industry in this country, you can't build tanks and other military implements. So there's a national security issue here. There are more. Wish I had time to sit down with you for about an hour and talk about them, but I got to run. I'm going to hang up, and I'll listen to you, what I can listen to you off the air here. All right,
Larry. Listen, I appreciate the call. And, and China's been dumping stuff. I mean, they, remember that back in the 50s, the Japanese produced all that cheap trinket stuff and dumped it in America, and people bought it up and all that kind of thing. So Larry's right. I can tell right away. I can see where this is going. I'm going to get outvoted on this, ladies and gentlemen. You guys are going to outvote me on the tariff thing. I see that coming. Let's go to William in Winchester, Virginia. William, take your best shot at me. I got a target on my chest. Hit me.
Well, no, I'm not really that educated with it, but I'm just listening to the topic, and I like to stay well informed with the news and stuff like that. But I'm looking at it from a perspective of like long term. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. Yeah, prices of steel and aluminum, because we're so dependent on imported steel and imported aluminum. I'm looking down the road though, and I'm wondering if like everything else that President Trump's trying to do with bringing businesses back to America, if the long term is going to be worth the short term now. I mean, it's like everything that we're trying to do for our kids now in terms of teaching them the gospel, that they're the generation that can bring more people to Christ later. I'm wondering if we could just take that same thing with this. Maybe it's simple now. Maybe we pay more now, but maybe long term, I'm not sure. Maybe it ends up paying off, and everything evens out wages wise and steel, and everything's booming for America. And maybe we start exporting and things like that. I mean.
So just to be clear, William, you are willing to pay higher taxes now in a strategy to I don't know what would the long term strategy be?
I would agree. Yeah. Well, I understand the problem with that thinking, but we have to look at how we dug ourselves into this hole to begin with. And I mean, I work in the construction industry, so I understand it would affect us. But if construction business is booming, I mean, the contractors, I mean, they're going to pay what it costs to get what they need. And I mean, if it helps America out in the long term, I mean, short-term fixes at this part of where we're at in today's society, I mean, nothing's going to be a short-term fix.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, well, listen, I appreciate what you're saying, William. If you run a free market economy, which is what I think we ought to do, where it's free trade, it's a competitive market, and all that kind of thing, it's a rugged way to approach an economy, because you're going to have winners and you're going to have losers. But the winners and the losers are going to be identified by consumers, because the products that they buy, those are the winners. So the obligation then is on the producers to find a way to produce products at a price that people will buy. And that's the way you get the most efficient use of resources. That's the way you get the lowest prices for consumers. So I'm still a big fan of the free market. But I understand what you're saying, William. I appreciate it. Let's grab a call from Chris in Memphis, Tennessee. Chris, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mr. Fisher.
Hey.
I just wanted to point something out. We wouldn't be in this position and we wouldn't need this tariff if we didn't have so many regulations. Everybody knows that a regulation and a fee and a tax and everything, they're all taxes, every single bit of it. Notice how they said for every regulation created, you have to roll two back, get rid of two of them. Well, we didn't get that with taxation. We wouldn't be in this I'll put it to you this way. Look at the United States Department of Energy's website and look at the taxes and the fees per gallon of diesel, gasoline, per ton of propane, methane, butane, whatever, all energy sources. Look at the fees, the taxes, and the regulations. It's absolutely ridiculous. You wouldn't need a tariff if you would just simply roll back taxes and roll back a ton of regulations, because the regulations cost money.
All right, Chris, that is a great observation. That really hadn't been given much thought to that, but you are exactly right. I have no idea how many bruising regulations there are on the steel industry, but I bet it is off the charts. And it's useless, because they have an incentive to make good steel. They cut corners, they're going to lose business. All right, Randy, Memphis, Tennessee, got 30 seconds. Hit me with your best shot.
Okay, I tell you, I kind of agree with you about the unions, but at the same time, we can't change the unions. So the tariffs are going to help, I see, in regulating the price better, because the cheap China steel, it doesn't need to invade our country anymore. We need to produce jobs to up our economy in our country.
And so you believe the tariffs will help to keep our steel industry strong and competitive?
I don't understand why it would make our steel prices go up. I did hear you say that.
All right, Randy. I'm out of time, but I hear what you're saying, Randy. Appreciate your call. Got outvoted, ladies and gentlemen, like 7-zip. Be right back after the news. Stay with us.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio. 1milliondads.com is where men can learn and grow together as men of the cross. Close families and even national revival begin at home with strong fathers in the faith. Go to the website, read the articles. You're not alone. 1milliondads.com. Lead, or others will. Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, almost EP. School teachers in West Virginia continue their strike for a pay raise today. School has been out since February 22nd, as teachers say the pay raises approved by state lawmakers were paltry and unacceptable. Eben Brown has more.
West Virginia's school teachers have been out of class and in the state capitol demanding higher pay since last month, when the state legislature voted only to raise their pay no more than 2%. A deal championed by Governor Jim Justice for 5% was rejected by lawmakers.
We are out until this gets settled, and people deserve a living wage. That 5% puts us a little closer to that, and this was a deal breaker.
Teachers Union President Christine Campbell, the lawmakers are expected to be back in session today. Eben Brown, Fox News.
Police in Minnesota are looking for the person who beat an elderly man in a road rage incident.
The Anoka County Sheriff's Office says the victim braked suddenly Friday outside the Twin Cities to avoid a traffic situation, which apparently angered another driver so much that he followed the elderly man home, repeatedly punching him in the face and leaving him bloodied and battered. And the search is on for the suspect, described as a white male, about 35, short hair, 6 feet or taller, and considered dangerous. Anyone with information is urged to contact the Anoka County Sheriff's Department. In the Midwest Bureau, Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
A Pennsylvania pro-family activist hopes that voters in a special congressional election won't be fooled by the claims of the Democratic candidate that he is not a Nancy Pelosi liberal. Chad Groening has more.
Ads supporting Republican Rick Saccone have pounded Democrat Connor Lamb, saying that if he wins the March 13th special election in Pennsylvania's 18th congressional district, Lamb will be just one more congressional sheep, pun intended, behind that San Francisco liberal Nancy Pelosi. Lamb put out his own ad trying to disavow Pelosi.
My opponent wants you to believe the biggest issue in this campaign is Nancy Pelosi. It's all a big lie. I've already said on the front page of the newspaper that I don't support Nancy Pelosi.
Diane Gramley is president of the American Family Association of Pennsylvania. She doesn't believe Lamb's claim.
I think Connor Lamb definitely would be very far left Democrat, that he would definitely be at beck and call of Nancy Pelosi. I know his ad saying that he would not be, but I believe that he would. I think he's got a track record for being very much in the left field when it comes to many issues that are important to folks in the 18th congressional district.
Gramley says a Democratic victory in the heavily Republican district would not bode well for 2018, considering Donald Trump won the district by 20 points in 2016. She says it will come down to voter turnout. I'm Chad Groening.
Missouri wants to expand on its abortion parental notification law in order to protect underage girls seeking an abortion.
Missouri already has a law in place to require parental notification in the event a minor walks into an abortuary to terminate her preborn child. Susan Klein of Missouri Right to Life tells AFN the new measure passed the Missouri House with a lopsided majority vote.
It requires 2 custodial parent notification prior to a minor having an abortion, and the notification comes from one parent to the other parent. And basically it's looking at making sure that both parents are knowing what's going on in their minor child's life.
There are instances, though, where it's not appropriate to notify the second parent, And Klein says the measure deals with those situations.
There is a clause in the bill that basically says if there's any kind of an abusive parent or any kind of an abusive relationship, that this bill does not affect that. They do not have to notify the abusive parent. But this bill also looks at it's possible that it is the parent that is taking the child for the abortion, that parent could be the abusive parent.
There is another clause that bars notification of a parent in the event they have lost custody of the child by court order. Now the bill heads to the Missouri Senate for consideration. I'm Charlie Butts.
And the boom in U.S. oil production is expected to satisfy most of the world's growing appetite for oil through 2023. That's according to a new forecast by a global energy group. American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com. I'm Rusty Pugh.
All of chapter 4 through 19 has to do with what God is going to do when he pours out his wrath upon the earth. The church won't be here. The church will be in heaven. How do we know that? We just looked in through the door and the church is up there already.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series Escape the Coming Night, next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
No wonder fake news resonates so much with Trump fans, because so much of it is fake. The Huffington Post and BuzzFeed and Salon, they make their money by how many clicks they get.
You've had now a year adults acting like children, and now the children are acting like adults.
I can't imagine living by myself and not having an ability to defend myself.
The millennials, the Gen Xers are saying, look, we've heard enough.
There's about 3 cents worth of tin plate steel in this can.
Yesterday we told you about Chicago, the city of Chicago, and its new plan to give ID cards to illegal immigrants. Those official IDs will allow non-citizens to vote. America is supposed to be run by Americans. That's the point of it. If you're looking for a foreign influence scandal, and everyone in here in D.C. is looking for one, you got it.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Executive producer sent me a note that I'm talking too fast and I am butchering names. So my apologies for that. You maybe caught some of that and wondered if I'm off my meds or what. I'm just trying to talk too fast. And again, this goes back to the Barack Obama thing where, remember they said about him, look, that guy's brain, it just operates at hypersonic speed, right, and his mouth can't keep up.
That's right.
So that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
I'll never be accused of speaking too fast.
Or me being accused of thinking too fast. So we're all good. You'll have to take it from here.
Yeah. Either that or my brain operates at such a slow RPM that it doesn't feed enough information to my tongue to get there in time to say the right thing. That could be the case, too.
Those of us that are around you know better than that.
All right, well, let's get into some more stuff. And ladies and gentlemen, that was a brutal segment for your loyal, cheerful, and humble host.
You took a beating.
I took a beating. I mean, you guys outvoted me like 6-0 or 7-0 or what? No, I got shut out.
Yeah, did you feel like the Washington Generals there against the Globetrotters?
Yeah. So anyway, obviously we got a difference of opinion here on this whole deal, and I've got a couple of more pieces on the tariff that I want to read to you for your thinking. And this will be an opportunity, I think, as we process this tariff thing, maybe to educate ourselves on economic issues. Maybe we'll all get an education, as I include myself in that. Let's grab some other sound bites on the topic of tariffs. Here's Peter Navarro, clip number 3, and he's the one that is tasked with selling this to the American people. He was on the Sunday morning talk shows, Sunday morning, selling these tariffs to the American people. He's talking here with Chris Wallace, who does a good job. Remember, I think Chris Wallace, for my money, is the best journalist working in television today, frankly. He's fair, he's even-handed, he's direct, he can't be buffaloed. He asks the tough questions. I don't even know what his personal politics are because his job is just to ferret out the truth. So good for Chris Wallace. Anyway, he pushes Peter Navarro pretty hard in this interview. Let's listen to clip number 3.
So, a new $175 per vehicle tax times 17 million vehicles sold in the USA in 2017 equals almost $3 billion in new annual consumer taxes just for steel and autos. Overall, when you, if I may, sir, if you took not just cars, but all the products that use imported steel or imported aluminum, we're talking about a tax on American consumers in the billions of dollars.
I like Secretary Ross's math a whole lot better. Let's do it for aluminum. If you look at a 10% tariff on aluminum, 6-pack of beer or Coke, that's $0.015. If you look at the other end of the spectrum, Boeing 777, it's one of the best airliners ever made. It's a $330 million aircraft. We're talking about an increase in costs at the worst of $25,000. So,
and that's nothing to Peter Navarro. Apparently, he thinks that's chicken feed. Well, from my vantage point, $25,000 here, $25,000 there. Pretty soon, you're talking about real money. And again, this is how and this is a tax increase. Let's be honest about it. This is a tax increase. Everybody understands that. Everybody accept this is a tax increase on the American worker because that tariff is going to raise the cost of every product we buy that's made with steel or with aluminum. It's going to increase the cost that we pay for every product that we consume that's made with steel or with aluminum. And notice Chris Wallace points out that this is an effect when you count the amount of steel that goes and aluminum that go into an automobile. This is a per vehicle tax of $175. And again, they'll say, well, you're buying a $30,000 car. What's $175 here? It's $175 there. But that's the whole point. This stuff starts to accumulate. All right, so he thinks that is no big deal. $25,000 to increase the cost of a plane, that's no big deal. All right, let's go to clip number 4. Here is Chris Wallace talking to Peter Navarro. Clip number 4.
I take objection to the idea that the talk of trade wars is an invention of the media when the president tweeted out, trade wars are good and easy to win. We have limited time.
You guys are fanning the flames here. What I'm trying to say...
I'm fanning the flames. I didn't write the presidential tweet.
What I'm trying to say...
So again, that's Chris Wallace objecting to the fact that the media, conservative media, by repeating the president's message was somehow fanning the flames of trade war. And again, my concern is not so much for a trade war. I think the people that say this is where this inevitably is going to lead, I think they're right. The European Union has already said we're going to start taxing Levi's. We're going to start imposing a tariff on either 2 other products they were talking about. I forget what they were. They were going to impose tariffs on three products overall. Jeans was one of them. And it might have been
Harley Davidson.
Oh, yeah, Harley Davidson's. They're going to throw a tariff
on bourbon. I think bourbon or whiskey.
Yeah,
or
bourbon.
Something.
That's right. So they're going to impose their own tariff. So right away, you've got this trade war. We impose a tariff on steel and aluminum. They respond by imposing a tariff on jeans and on bourbon and on Harley Davidsons. None of which may affect anybody in this listening audience, but nevertheless, some Americans are going to be affected by those increased taxes. One more Larry Kudlow clip. Yeah, I do better. I do had better slow down. Let my tongue catch up to my fevered brain. Larry Kudlow, clip number 7.
Well, look, employment, by the way, just on that last point, employment with the Bush steel tariffs did not go up. I just want to say it did not go up. Again, that's Vero Duvergy from Mercatus. I just got off the phone there. She's a great trade analyst. Look, if it's $50 higher, if it's $100 higher, that can hurt. That can hurt a family budget. It could be more than that. Look, in theory, if you raise the tariff by 25%, the price can go up by 25%.
So Larry Kudlow is more attuned, I think, to the impact of increased taxes on the average American family. And whatever else a tariff is, it's a tax increase on ordinary Americans, because ordinary Americans, we use stuff every day that's made out of aluminum or made out of steel, and it's going to raise the cost of every single product we buy. Maybe not by a lot, but it adds up after a while. Now here's Nigel Farage. This is clip R1. Nigel Farage, and he's critical of the EU because the EU has got a position on tariffs. And Nigel Farage is criticizing them for the way they're hammering the United States. Let's listen to clip R1.
This story at the moment is being portrayed. Trump's the bad guy, the European Union are the good guys. Trump's the protectionist, the EU are the free traders. It is deep hypocrisy for the EU to be doing this. They have already put tariffs on aluminum and steel, and the fact that Trump does it, so it's okay for the European Union to do it, but it's not okay for Trump to do it. So it's absolutely ridiculous. And if the European Union want to retaliate by putting further tariffs on, Tennessee bourbon or Levi's jeans or Harley Davidsons, they will find, a tit for tat with German motor cars. So I would say to the EU, all that Trump has done are the same things that you yourself has done. Leave it where it is.
And what the
if you want to push it, this man will not back down.
All right, so the EU, they use tariffs, and socialist countries do. That's a standard technique that they use. One other, this is not a main focus for me. I'm looking at a piece in USA Today talking about the fact that tariffs will have an impact on the broader health of the whole economy. Not talking about trade wars or anything, but it will increase inflationary pressures. It will encourage the Federal Reserve to raise interest rates more quickly than markets anticipate. Severe negative consequences for the overall U.S. economy. Back with more. Stay with us.
You shall not murder. Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. This is the 6th commandment of the 10 commandments. You shall not murder. We are asking schools all over America to put this on their marquees, put this on their signs out in front of their school for 1 week to remind America's students that innocent life is precious. Help us spread the word about this campaign to your friends and family. Please go to our website, afa.net, and sign our open letter to America's schools. We need to proclaim this message, you shall not murder, across the land. Why? Because gun control alone will not solve matters of the heart. We need our young people to understand that murder is a violation of God's law, and also it's a violation of the laws all across this land. So help us. Go to afa.net and spread the word.
Hey, I'm Brant. Maybe you've heard me talking about MediShare, but now I give you my friend Sherry.
Yes, I have loved MediShare. Loved it.
Is that all you have to say? Because this will be really short.
No, I really do love it. I've saved hundreds a month. And overall, I just think it's a better choice of a healthcare program for me. I'm really happy with it. And honestly, normally, I don't even like talking about this stuff.
Nobody does.
But MediShare is different. MediShare members share each other's healthcare bills. We pray for each other. It's a not-for-profit, so we all save money.
True. Tell them about the thing.
What thing?
The online thing.
Oh, yeah, I used that the other night. MediShare members can now access a doctor online 24/7. You can get a prescription for the flu or something just that fast.
So MediShare can save you hundreds a month. You get to be part of the community. You get a huge network of doctors and providers to choose from.
It's all pretty awesome.
It's all pretty awesome.
It's all pretty awesome.
The final verdict from Jerry. So call 855-SALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-SALM-23.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Okay, welcome back to Focal Point American Family Radio. Glad to have you in the conversation, whether it's via Facebook, live streaming us on Facebook. Don't forget, you can go to Facebook-Brian Fisher and live stream the program. We record it as the program is being delivered. We upload it to the Facebook page right after the program with an extensive table of contents so you can find your way around. You might be listening on one of our 184 stations that comprise the American Family Radio network. You also might be audio streaming us at afr.net. Go there. You can listen on your computer. Go to afr.net. The talk radio will automatically begin to play. You could be listening to me right now or watching me right now on a podcast. I mean, the Facebook page essentially serves as a podcast. If you can't get there and watch it live, you can always catch the program. And we also have podcasts. You can go to afr.net, download the podcast. Very easy to do. A lot of people keep up with us in that way.
And don't forget the YouTube channel.
And we have YouTube. You can
Roku.
watch it live on YouTube, and you can also watch it tape delayed on the YouTube channel.
And also Roku channel. Well, it's the Calgary Nation or Calgary Network is
Calgary
on
Network
Roku.
on Roku, and it airs at 8 o'clock at night on the Roku channel, Calgary Nation. Now, I just want a couple of other things I want to bring to your attention that have to do with this whole tariff conversation. By the way, Republicans are out there frantically trying to talk Trump out of this. Paul Ryan has already personally spoken with the president. This is from Politico. Congressional Republicans are frantically lobbying President Donald Trump to reconsider his move to slap tariffs on steel and aluminum, even considering legislative action to try and stop him. Well, the reality is, again, this is not to be critical of Donald Trump. I'm not saying that at all, because he just did what every other president has done. So this is not a slam on Donald Trump. Please don't misunderstand me. What I'm saying is that the Congress does not give a president the authority to do this. This is an authority that is reserved to Congress. If we were still using the Constitution the founders gave us, then if you wanted to get a tariff, you would have to convince the Congress to do that. And I'm looking at the way the Republicans are responding to this. There's no way in the world this thing would get through Congress, but their hands are kind of tied now because they've virtually given away this authority to the president. So, this piece on USA Today is talking about the overall impact. And what the Republicans are concerned about is they're concerned about the impact on the wallets of ordinary American families. Here they went to a considerable amount of difficulty and effort to cut the taxes. Remember, 80% of the American people are going to get a tax cut. And now with what they have given with the left hand, they're worried about taking back with the right hand. The fuel tax, they haven't done anything with it, but the fuel tax that was being bandied about, that would take away about 60% of the tax cut. If they do this tariff thing, that will take away another percentage of the tax cut, till finally the American people may wind up just breaking even, which is not what they were promised by the Republican Party. And this writer on USA Today, Melvin Krause, he's a senior fellow at Stanford's Hoover Institution. Hoover Institution, they're the good guys. That's a conservative element at Stanford University. And he says, look, there is a broader concern for the health of the whole economy. Trump's new trade restrictions, by increasing inflationary pressures, will encourage the Federal Reserve to raise interest rates more than markets anticipate. Such a move would have severe negative consequences for the overall U.S. economy, totally unrelated to the use of steel and aluminum. Tariffs and other trade restrictions of intermediate goods, such as metals, are inflationary. It's not just the price of aluminum that goes up behind the tariff wall. It's the price of beer cans and ultimately beer that will go up to consumers. And it won't take long for the inflationary cancer to spread. Given protection from trade wall, domestic businesses can be relied upon to swiftly raise prices. Why? Because there'll be no competition. They can raise prices because there's no competition from foreign producers to put pressure on them to bring prices down. It'll be a seller's market, and the consumer will pay the price. What happens with beer will happen with trucks and farm equipment and everything else made with metal. The cost of more expensive transportation and equipment will be passed through to goods that have no metal at all, eventually leading to price pressures on tomatoes and paper. So Melvin Krause, senior fellow, Stanford Hoover Institution, is that this will be bad for the overall health of the economy. I agree with him. Apparently, our listening audience, however, does not. By the way, on another economic front, just to give you another example of how this thing can work, this is from nationalreview.com. After announcing in January a $250 million plant expansion in Springfield, Sweden's Electrolux reported Friday that its plans are now on hold. Electrolux is Europe's largest home appliance manufacturer. It is delaying its Tennessee investment after President Trump announced Thursday new tariffs on imported aluminum and steel. So they froze their expansion plans. American solar company SunPower will lay off about 3% of its workforce in March, a decision that comes after President Trump began imposing new tariffs on imported solar materials earlier this year. SunPower has already started the process of laying off between 150 and 250 workers, largely from its research and development and marketing positions. The cuts will amount to about a 10% decrease in operational expenses. The cuts made by the publicly traded company are largely an effort to stop the bleeding from the new costs associated with the 30% tariffs. Now, on an uptick on the economy, the U.S. will be the world's largest oil producer by 2023. We're going to overtake Russia and become the largest oil producer in the world. This is according to the IEA, which is the International Energy Agency. So that's good news. Our oil industry is cranking up. I don't know what you think about this, because this could be good or bad, but there is a new burger flipping robot that is cooking at the Caliburger fast food chain. Jeff, I think you talked about this. His name is Flippy.
Yep.
Flippy the robot. He's now in the kitchen at a fast food restaurant called Caliburger in Pasadena. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the issues. This is kind of a long shot deal, but it's something to keep in mind in the back of your mind when we talk about the immigration issue. Because the more low-wage immigrants come into the country, the more pressure there obviously is for low-wage jobs. What these robots are doing is they're replacing low-wage jobs. So it's just simply going to increase the pressure that's created by the fact you have all these illegal immigrants who are not skilled to do anything but handle low-wage jobs. These are the jobs that will be taken by robots. But anyway, he's flipping burgers at this place. He uses thermal imaging, 3D, and camera vision to sense when to flip. Now, a human has to put the raw patties on the grill, so Flippy just flips them.
Oh, okay.
It detects the temperature of the patty, the size of the patty, and the temperature of the grill, and it learns through artificial intelligence. Basically, the more burgers that Flippy flips, the smarter it gets. Right now, cheese and toppings are added by a co-worker, but maybe not for long.
Actually, that kind of reminds me of, we're looking for our listeners to come up with a nickname for Rob. We're thinking maybe along the lines Pushy, because he pushes the buttons, or Slidey,
I've got
something.
enough nicknames that
we don't want to be outdone by Caliburgers.
You'll have to let us in on what those nicknames are.
I think about Flippy about the way I feel about self-checkout at the grocery. I'm not a fan.
Well, you know, Debbie is. We go through self-checkout all the time. You know, I hate it. But Debbie just loves it. She zips through there, and when I go with her, I mean, we're just in there and out of there.
What is it you don't like about it, though? What you guys?
Oh, I don't. You know, I try to operate it, and I can't find the code, and I don't have the right change with me, or it rejects my credit card. I mean, it's
so you'd rather just leave that to somebody human?
Yeah, you know, if I was better at it, it wouldn't be a problem.
Hey, look,
if I used it more,
those checkers that do it regularly, they are good, because it takes me 3 times as long to check out, and not making any mistakes.
It doesn't save me time.
Just finding the scan code is the hard part. You know what I mean? Finding out where it is.
Yeah, I keep turning it. You know.
Yeah.
Well, let's grab clip number 2. You know, we had a lot of conversation about Russia, the Mueller investigation, and Mueller's investigation. By the way, this thing is just getting completely out of control. I mean, absolutely, totally out of control. Even Chuck Todd, by the way, I'll mention this. You know, Dennis McDonough was on his show yesterday claiming that Obama's warning to Putin. Remember when Barack Obama said that I sat down with Putin and I told him to his face, "You got to cut it out," and he stopped. That's almost a direct quote. Here's what Barack Obama said when he was meeting with Vladimir Putin. Where is that quote? Want to get the actual direct words. Here's what he said. "I felt that the most effective way to ensure that didn't happen, their tampering with the election process, was to talk to him directly and tell him to cut it out. And in fact, we did not see further tampering of the election process." That's Barack Obama. We did not see further tampering of the election process. That's in September of 2016. Got Barack Obama's word for it. Nothing to see here. A move along. But Chuck Todd says now, and Barack Obama said that was effective. It shut him down. I mean, I warned him. I got in his grill, and Vladimir Putin, he knows who the boss was in that conversation. I stared him down. He backed way off and stopped meddling with our elections. And Chuck Todd says we know now that that was not true, that the Russians kept right on trying to meddle with our election process. The New York Times had a piece yesterday or over the weekend that had 3 of their top reporters on it. The bylines had 3 of their top reporters on it, and it was about a guy by the name of George Nader. George Nader is a Lebanese-American businessman. Who has been on the fringes of international diplomacy for 3 decades. Not a player, on the fringes. Mr. Nader is now a focus of the investigation by Robert Mueller, investigating possible attempts by the Emiratis. This is United Arab Emirates. What happened to Russia? Yeah. I thought this was about Russia. Now they're talking about the United Arab Emirates. What in the world does that have to do with Mueller's charter? How does that fit into what they're doing? This thing is, like I say, it's just getting completely out of control. The investigators have also asked about Mr. Nader's role in the White House policymaking. These people said, what is it? It's not about policymaking, it's about interfering with the campaign, suggesting that the special counsel investigation has broadened beyond election meddling. You think so? Which is what it was restricted to. And the writers of the column said this, tongue-in-cheek, how much this line of inquiry is connected to Mr. Mueller's original task of investigating contacts between Mr. Trump's campaign and Russia is unclear. It's not unclear, it's non-existent. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Hi, this is Steve Tiber with 8 Days of Hope. We've seen God open up so many doors for us to help serve and love those who get affected by a natural disaster.
As the trees and the wind started crashing down around us, my wife was, of course, very diligently praying, Lord, please be with us.
Very simply, we do it because God commands us to love others.
I see these volunteers all as a gift from God.
And I'm just grateful they're here, helping out. It's a blessing.
If you're interested in becoming a part of what God's doing through 8 Days of Hope, please go to 8daysofhope.com, click on Get Involved, submit your email address.
I've noticed that whenever there's a time in my life when things might be a little gloomy, the number one thing that I can do is to go serve somebody.
And I would encourage anyone else to, it's worth it. Come out and do it next time if you didn't make it to this one, and the Father will really bless you in it.
Thank you so much for your prayers and volunteering with 8 Days of Hope.
Hi, this is Kirk Cameron, and I am honored to be partnering with the Ministry of Preborn and American Family Radio to help moms choose life.
Actor Kirk Cameron supports Preborn.
My 4 oldest children were adopted. That is because of caring and compassionate people who help those young mothers choose life. My wife is an adopted child, and her birth mother chose life for her. If it weren't for those caring individuals that help those young moms value the sacredness of life, I wouldn't have my wife, I wouldn't have my 4 adopted children, and the 2 natural-born children that we have wouldn't exist either. My whole family is here because of people that are involved with ministries like Preborn.
Underwrite a free ultrasound and help save a baby's life. Go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com, or dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher.
Brian J. Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point American Family Radio. We were talking just a moment ago about how the Mueller investigation just completely careening out of control. He's now issued a subpoena to receive all communications, that's emails, texts, handwritten notes, and so forth, that this particular witness he's talking about sent and received regarding the following people. And there's 10 of them on there, including Donald Trump, including Hope Hicks, including Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, Steve Bannon. This is just a raw fishing expedition. Mm-hmm. I mean, if it's going to be a genuine subpoena, there's got to be some reason to believe that the information that you're asking for is relevant to your investigation. And I don't see how they could possibly demonstrate that. But again, so this is just Mueller on a witch hunt You know, and it's becoming pretty clear that his effort is just to delegitimize President Trump and try to pave the pathway for them to pursue impeachment of President Trump. But notice that he's asking for all this communication from November 1, 2015 to the present. So what is that, 2.5 years? Which means they will be able to look at all of the communication that had to do with the campaign. They'll get to see all of that, all of the internal communication that had to do with that campaign. That's none of their business whatsoever. But they'll be mining it for little insights and all that kind of stuff, how they can take on Donald Trump the next time. So I don't know. It's just crazy, you know. And the whole basis for this thing was fraudulent. Now the Russians are saying that the U.S. is trying to meddle with their elections. So now they're turning the tables on us. Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabakov saying the U.S. is looking to create chaos in Russia. The Russians are voting on March 18. Vladimir Putin is on the ballot. Russia claims to have evidence the U.S. has attempted to interfere in Moscow's forthcoming presidential election. U.S. looking to create chaos in Russia. And Vladimir Putin, by the way, is an overwhelming favorite in the polls. You know, the Inspector General and the DOJ is getting ready to accuse Andrew McCabe of misleading investigators and approving a leak. Andrew McCabe, remember, was the deputy director of the FBI. That guy was a player. He was very high up in the food chain. Remember, he was forced to resign, and he's been accused. The Inspector General is going to accuse him of approving an improper leak to the Wall Street Journal just before the election, and then misleading investigators who attempted to look into it. Well, that's exactly what Paul Manafort is going to jail for, misleading investigators. That's what Michael Flynn was threatened with jail for, misleading investigators. Well, if the shoe fits, then Andrew McCabe ought to be wearing that same shoe here before too long. You know, and the FBI interviewed Huma Abedin about Clinton emails after the Hillary Clinton investigation was closed. So they closed the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails, and then they interview Huma Abedin about Hillary Clinton emails. But they don't apparently reopen the investigation. This was in December of 2016, more than a month after they officially closed the investigation. And this had to do with Hillary Clinton emails that were on Anthony Weiner's laptop. So more questions about the Hillary Clinton investigation, or lack thereof, into her emails. Internal FBI documents are continuing to raise questions about the use of the unverified Steele dossier. In other words, the more that we read, the more confirmation we get that all the information in the dossier was unverified and that it was in fact used to get this FISA warrant. So the more information that comes out, the worse they begin to look. All right, let's grab clip number 2. Bill Maher, interestingly enough, swerves into some genuine, legitimate journalism here about who is causing the real division and chaos in our culture. Remember, the accusation is that's what the Russians were doing. They were trying to sow chaos, trying to sow division. Now they're saying, no, that's what Trump is trying to do in our elections, is to sow chaos. Here's Bill Maher. Listen to this. This is
no
an
wonder
arch liberal.
fake news.
This is an arch liberal telling us who is the real source of the chaos and the division.
No wonder fake news resonates so much with Trump fans, because so much of it is fake. Just nonsense made to keep you perpetually offended with an endless stream of controversies that aren't controversial and outrages that aren't outrageous. Because places like the Huffington Post and BuzzFeed and Salon, they make their money by how many clicks they get. Yes, the people who see themselves as morally superior are actually ignoring their sacred job of informing citizens of what's important and instead sowing division for their own selfish ends. Hey, wait, isn't that what Russia was doing to us? Yeah, it is.
All right, so there's Bill Maher. It's the fake news producers that are sowing division, and they're just doing it as clickbait. They're trying to get headlines and stories out there that they know are false, that they know are fallacious, but they're hoping that they will be sensational enough that people will read their stories and click click on them is just regular old clickbait. Now, let's drop down to Tucker Carlson, clip number 12. This is on the immigration issue, and I believe Tucker Carlson has a real good point. This is something we've talked about before, about why the Democrats are just so committed to open borders policy. Let's listen.
Yesterday, we told you about Chicago, the city of Chicago, and its new plan to give ID cards to illegal immigrants. Those official IDs will allow non-citizens to vote. That's against federal law, not to mention the very idea of democracy. America is supposed to be run by Americans. That's the point of it. But politicians in Chicago are pushing to subvert that. If you're looking for a foreign influence scandal, and everyone in here in D.C. is looking for one, you got it, because it's happening in Chicago right now. Foreign citizens will be electing our political leaders.
In fact, the reality is, this will sound like an extreme statement, but you got to take the long view of this. What Democrats are trying to do is to replace the electorate in America with foreigners. That's what they're doing. They are trying to replace the current electorate in America with foreigners, because the Democrats have virtually zero birth rate. They don't like children. They think children are a pox on the environment. They're imploring people, lecturing people about how immoral it is to bring children into the world because of the impact they have on the environment. So they don't want kids. They don't like kids. They don't like your kids. They don't want you to have kids. So where are they going to get the voters for the next generation? They're getting them from outside our borders. Open borders, ushering them in. I mean, in Chicago, they're going to have the right to vote, even though they're illegal. They got an ID card, but they're illegal aliens, and they'll be able to vote and select our national leaders, because they'll get the vote in presidential elections as well. Clip 13, here's Tucker, second clip.
We'll just give you a couple examples. One is a Honduran citizen who has been arrested multiple times for cocaine trafficking and, by the way, for having sex with a minor. Another, from Mexico, has been arrested and convicted for carrying a loaded gun, for DUI, drug smuggling. Both of these guys have been deported from the U.S. multiple times. They've come back every time. They've been allowed to do that because Democratic politicians want them to stay here because, you know the answer, each one of these people, no matter how revolting, is a potential vote for them. That's the bottom line. Across the country, Democrats have given up on the middle class. They're not trying to fix your problems. They don't care. They don't share your concerns. They're not pretending to. They're the party of foreign voters now, many of them illegal.
So Democrat Party, now the party of foreign voters. And again, what they're trying to do is to replace the electorate. All right, a couple of quick sound bites we'll squeeze in before we go to the phones. Let's drop down to Dana Lash, clip number 9. And here's Dana Lash, the spokeswoman for just spokesman. I'm going to use the word spokesman. I'm tired of this PC nonsense. Spokesman for the NRA, Dana Lash.
Well, we've made it clear where the NRA has made it clear where they stand in terms of where we are with increasing the age. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to punish people to do that. I mean, I lived on my own before I was 21 years old, and I can't imagine not, in my mind, Anderson, I'm like 9 feet tall and I weigh 500 pounds, but in reality, I'm 5'6" and I weigh $125. I will be easily overpowered, and I can't imagine living by myself and not having an ability to defend myself. And there are millions of young adults that age that are in that same predicament. It doesn't make any sense to punish them for the failures of government.
And most people are blaming failures of government for the shooting. Here's a study, I think I mentioned it last Friday, but 54% of Americans surveyed by Rasmussen Reports believe that the shooting could have been avoided if government agencies had responded to warning signs from the killer. 33% blame a lack of adequate gun control. So 54% blame failures of government, 33% blame lack of gun control. But curiously, nobody, and this is the subject of my column last week, nobody's blaming the shooter. Why doesn't Rasmussen Reports, how many of you blame the shooter? Because that would be my answer. The shooter's at fault here. He loaded the gun. He went on campus. He started firing at innocent civilians. That the shooter is to blame for this. I mentioned the Oscars, surrounded by a wall of 500 armed officers, even though they were there in an anti-gun mood. Florida Senate, by the way, on Saturday, they rejected a ban on assault weapons. It appeared to have passed by a voice vote, but when the actual roll call vote was taken, it lost. And they also voted to arm teachers. There are some conditions associated with it, but they did vote to put guns, in the hands of school personnel. Good for them. Remember, Delta Airlines decided they were going to cancel their credit card with the NRA? They lost $40 million in tax breaks. I mean, the Georgia legislature got together. They said, all right, we're taking away your $40 million tax break. You know, which is, frankly, that's corporate welfare. I don't like that any more than them taking it away. I mean, I'm happy with them taking it away. But what are they doing giving out $40 million in tax breaks? How about giving us some of that? Yeah. Anyway, so they canceled their NRA card. Do you know how many NRA people used their discount on Delta Airlines? 13. So this decision by Delta Airlines cost them $3 million per discount. Pretty hefty little penalty. By the way, NRA membership rolls took off after the Florida massacre. People, I believe, recognizing the value of what NRA is doing. Time magazine said it now appears efforts have embarrassingly backfired, having only succeeded in dramatically boosting memberships in the NRA and pro-gun groups. That is according to Time magazine. And I told you, ladies and gentlemen, we did not have anything to fear here. Talked you down off the ledge. Mitch McConnell, gun legislation is not even on the Senate agenda. Mitch McConnell has no intention of bringing any gun control legislation forward. Not to worry, ladies and gentlemen, we're safe for now. Focal Point American Family Radio. Be back with your phone calls. Stay with us.
Life, Love, and Family, featuring the American Association of Christian Counselors President, Dr. Tim Clinton. Each weekday evening, you'll hear Dr. Clinton and his expert guests address important and sometimes difficult issues of our day that impact your life, your love, and your family, using the scriptures as their text. Access to archive programs is available at lifeloveandfamily.net. Life, Love, and Family, 11 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
Some 2,000 years ago, the followers of the crucified Christ learned that he had risen from the grave. They quickly spread the word that Jesus was alive. It's good news that spread from one generation to the next, and now it's our turn. One way to tell this extraordinary news to others is by simply wearing and sharing our colorful He Lives Easter buttons. Get your pack of 10 today at afastore.net.
Attention all Christians who believe that America needs a spiritual revival, an awakening, a message of the gospel for our times. This is Alex McFarland encouraging you to attend the 2018 edition of Truth for a New Generation. This is a conference with the theme Save a Nation. And on March 23-24 in Greensboro, North Carolina, you will hear an amazing lineup of speakers, including Josh McDowell, apologist J. Warner Wallace, Lauren Green and Todd Starnes from Fox News, attorney Abe Hamilton III of the American Family Association, music by the bands and orchestra from North Greenville University, and much, much more. Sessions for all ages, equipping you to share your faith confidently in any situation. Visit truthforanewgeneration.com. That's March 23-24, TNG 2018. You can find it at truthforanewgeneration.com.
Presented in part by the American Family Association.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Focal Point, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Last segment of the day, we'll take your calls. Number to call is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Remember, I told you the other day that the left, they just lose their minds. And they have made children now the fount of all wisdom in America's political life. They've elevated children to some kind of magical strata as the source of all wisdom. We must take our cues from them. We must learn from them. Let's drop back to clip number 8. There's Van Jones, a hardcore leftist. And apparently he wants to vacate his chair and let a toddler sit in it. Let's listen.
Those young people are just extraordinary. I mean, you've had now a year adults acting like children, and now the children are acting like adults and trying to get something done.
So the adults are acting like children, and the children are acting like adults. Well, Van, put your money where your mouth is and let a child sit in your chair. Let's go to clip number 10. This is John Kasich. John Kasich, he's just all over everywhere because he dumps on Donald Trump, so the media loves him. You want to get some time on TV, just dump on Donald Trump. Look at where it's got Jeff Flake. I mean, he cannot even he can't even get 20% in his own state, and he's on TV every time you turn around. And he was bragging yesterday about how much time he spends talking to Barack Obama. Yeah, me and Barack, we're just like best buds, as if someone thinks that's going to help him defeat Donald Trump for president in 2020. So he just has these completely inflated and completely disconnected to reality visions about where his political career could be headed. But John Kasich thinks there may be a third party, and he believes, of course, that he's just the guy to head it up. So he wants to be president, too. That's a total pipe dream for John Kasich.
Yeah, I don't think he ever did quit the primaries, did he? He's still running. And
probably still is. Anyway, he's drunk the Kool-Aid on the magical wisdom of the younger generation. Clip 10.
Young people, the millennials, the Gen Xers are saying, look, we've heard enough. Deliver something. Deliver something. We don't want all these excuses. Deliver something. And frankly, they put it to me every once in a while, and I try to explain to them the politics of why it's so difficult. They don't want to hear it. And you know what? Good for them. Bully for them. I love them. I love the way that they're saying, let's do the art of the impossible rather than the art of the possible. And the more they push, the better chance we have of getting something done to have greater gun safety.
And, of course, it's on gun control. Got to listen to the kids. The kids have the answer. All right, so again, ladies and gentlemen, I would not trust anybody who wants to put the shaping of public policy in the hands of teenagers. I mean, there's a reason why the Constitution says you got to be 35 if you want to run for president. We want to make sure that we got somebody with some minimum amount of life experience, education, time and grade, school of hard knocks, and learning something about the American political system. All right, well, let's go to the phones. Let's begin with Keith in Lansing, Michigan. Keith, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hey, I just wanted to say that doing a great job.
Thank you.
Especially about the whole thing of raising tariffs.
Yes, sir.
Just giving you a little bit of support. I understand what you're talking about, and I completely agree.
Okay. So there is one out there. There's one out there. So, Keith, either you and I are the smartest guys in the room, or we have absolutely no idea what we are talking about. All right, well, thank you. Do you want to add anything to that about why you support the view on tariffs, or you just want to let me know you agree?
No, I agree. I don't support the thing in tariffs because I understand if you raise it up to like $1.10, then everybody else can say, hey, I'll still be cheaper, but I'll raise it up to $1.05.
Yeah.
So everything's going to raise up. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. All right. I appreciate it, Keith. You know, and Keith's exactly right. You know, and the people that were defending the tariffs, like Wilbur Ross, we had them admitting that to us. Yeah, it's going to cause the cost of cans to go up, but it's insignificant. You won't even notice it in your family budget, that kind of stuff. Let's go to Josh, Winchester, Virginia. Josh, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hey, Brian. Thanks. Thanks for taking my call. I'm going to agree with you too that the tariffs is a terrible idea. So you got two people on your board.
No. Okay.
Say that again.
You got another one on your side.
Oh, okay. All right. I appreciate it. I didn't understand the last thing you said. All right. I appreciate that, Josh. You guys are good for my self-image, which was beginning to take a real beating. All right. Thank you, Josh. Let's go to Brian, Largo, Florida. Brian, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hey, yeah, I just have a kind of a question. I had an uncle that worked in the steel mills in Gary, Indiana, and he had to go into early retirement because they closed down the plant because all these regulations, these nut job global warmers were putting on them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, if Trump lifts off these regulations, stuff like that, these plants start opening up again, stuff like that, won't that lower the cost of aluminum still here in America?
Oh, yeah.
And raising the prices of them coming in, won't that kind of like balance them out or might even overtake it?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Brian. And I don't have any idea how much a difference it would make if you reduced regulations in the steel industry. I mean, reducing regulations in the coal industry was huge, and just kind of releasing that industry to start clicking again. But you realize the Chinese are not going to be hampered by any of the environmental restrictions that we put on American producers. If we just got rid of those, then they could compete with with the Chinese, we wouldn't have to even to be talking about tariffs. So, we had a number of callers have raised that issue. We got to do something about regulations. Before we start monkeying with tariffs, let's see what we can do with environmental and other kinds of regulations. Thank you, Brian. That's a great observation, great call. Let's go to Michael in Athens, West Virginia. What's on your mind?
Well, I've got a couple of two quick observations. One is this idea of the children being so wise.
Yes, sir.
Last week, the teenagers were chewing Tide Pods. This week, they're trying to tell us how to run the world.
Yeah. Well, and I listen to people in D.C., Michael, and you see what comes out of their mouths, and you wonder, well, maybe some Tide Pods, maybe we get more from people that eat Tide Pods than we do out of the current crop. I'm just kidding there. But yeah, and that's the whole point, Michael. These, they may be bright and they may be very intelligent. They may have a great future and all that. I'm not disputing any of that. But that we would consider them the fount of wisdom, I mean, that is a spectacular level of foolishness. All right, Michael, thank you. Good call. Let's grab one from Michael in Columbus, Ohio. Michael, what's on your mind?
I just wanted to make a comment about Governor Kasich's stance that he took. First of all, he can say what he wants to and take the position that he wants to. But ultimately, when he came down to, there's a couple things that he wanted to do. First of all, he wanted to change the age limit in Ohio to 21 for certain firearms, which is like your shotguns and your AR-15s. And then he wanted to restrict the magazine capacity for AR-15s. And he wanted to do a stronger background check on it, but it was kind of an overreach. I can't remember exactly what it was. But then people went into a panic in one of our gun stores here that I go to all the time. I went there a couple of times last week, and people were a little panicked and were buying firearms. But ultimately, what happened was that people were missing. And the headlines is that he had to meet with the council, and he was going to confer with the council and decide what to do from there. After he met with the council, it was an overwhelming decision not to change the age restrictions. It was an overwhelming decision not to ban the AR-15. It was an overwhelming decision not to change any other restrictions. So he can have the position that he wants to, but he has to listen to the people, and I think that he realizes that. So he'll take the one position that's not popular, but then when it comes down to the council, we overwhelm his phone lines, and the people of Ohio are not going to stand for that. And I'm glad that he had no choice but to respect our Second Amendment rights.
Yeah, terrific, Michael. That's great. And that's the same thing that happened with Mitch McConnell. I mean, I have no doubt about the fact that legislators, lawmakers in the House and Senate, they heard from their constituents, don't you dare raise the age limit. I want my college student, my college daughter, to be able to defend herself like Dana Lash was saying when she is away at college. Don't you go for gun control restrictions. And that's why Mitch McConnell said, we're going to just dump that. We're going to flatline it. It's not going anywhere in this Congress. By the way, the executive producer texted me to tell you as a listening audience not to feel sorry for me because I never go shopping alone. So, she's just letting you know I don't have to tamper with the do-it-yourself thing at the store because I always have her there to do it with me or for me. All right, let's go to Michael. No, I'm sorry. Let's go to Larry in Muskegon, Michigan. Larry, what's on your mind? Talk to me.
I heard you talking about these tariffs on the steel. We've been working 2 years on a project. Finally got prices nailed down on it for a large construction company for high-rise buildings. And we no more got the prices all nailed down on the steel we were going to have to purchase, because very, very large quantities. And we were told by the steel companies we're getting material from that they are going to raise their prices up to 25% because they know they can get it if these tariffs go through.
Yeah. Well, there you go. And that's what Larry Kudlow was saying. Theoretically, if you're going to raise tariffs by 25%, the price of products can go up by 25%. And what Larry is saying, and this is current. This happened this week or last week. This is brand new stuff. Yeah, they've already heard from steel companies, we're raising our prices 25%. Why? Because we can. So who's going to pay for it? Well, Larry's team's going to pay for it. The construction company's going to have to pay higher prices. That means consumers are going to have to pay higher prices for whatever building is being constructed. All right, let's go to Sad But True. Let's go to Vicky Cape Girardeau What, Vicki, is on your mind?
Hi, I've just had a little problem with trying to come to a conclusion with this. I have a question, and that is,
yes, ma'am.
People who have never been gainfully employed and really prefer not to be gainfully employed, why do they have the right to vote?
Well, that's a very, very good question, Vicki. You know, back in the colonial days, you had to own property to vote. And the reason was if you let people that didn't own property, they wouldn't care what kind of policies and the impact it would have on your private property. There was no restraint. Focal Point American Family Radio. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Go with God.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
American Family Association, a ministry with a mission to inform, equip, and activate people like you to strengthen the moral foundations of American culture and to give aid to the church here and abroad in her task of fulfilling the Great Commission. We couldn't do it without your day-to-day support. American